There are stories whispered across Africa, stories so old that the earth itself seems to breathe when they are spoken. Stories of gods who shaped kingdoms, commanded storms, and walked among men. But hidden within this ancient tapestry is a name so feared, so powerful, that even other gods refuse to speak it aloud. A god whose presence bent reality, and whose disappearance remains one of Africa's greatest mysteries. Across villages and sacred forests, elders recall fragments of an ancient warning. Beware the god who terrifies the gods. In every culture there is always one spirit whose might stands above the rest, one being whose footsteps echo across realms. Yet in Africa, this god was more than a legend. He was the force that even divine beings approached with trembling reverence. His story was buried, erased, and locked behind centuries of silence. But silence does not kill truth. It only buries it for a time. Today, that silence ends. Today, Deep in History opens the forgotten scrolls, dives into hidden myths, and resurrects a god the world tried to erase. A god whose shadow shaped kingdoms, altered destinies, and rewrote the rules of spiritual power across the continent. This is the story your teachers never told you. The truth missionaries hid, and the mystery historians still whisper about in disbelief. For while the world looks to Greece, Rome, and Egypt for tales of power, Africa remains the cradle of the most ancient, most complex, and most terrifying deities ever known. Our ancestors didn't just worship gods, they negotiated with them, feared them, and sometimes battled them. And at the center of these divine conflicts stands one figure, a being whose might forced even rival gods into submission. Who was he? Why was his name struck from memory? And what happened the night the gods themselves trembled? This is the revelation you were never meant to discover. This is the story of the forgotten African god who terrifies even other gods. And now, the search for his true identity begins. Across the continent, from the red sands of the Sahel to the deep emerald forests of the Niger Basin, there exists a strange silence in oral tradition, an empty space where a name should be. Elders speak around it, never through it. Priests acknowledge it without pronouncing it. It is a silence that feels intentional, almost ritualistic, as though speaking this name aloud might call back a power the world has not been prepared to face again. Some say the name vanished because it was feared. Others believe it was stolen, scratched out during the violent collision between African spirituality and invading civilizations. When missionaries burned shrines, this god's symbols were the first to disappear. When colonial scribes documented indigenous beliefs, this deity was omitted, buried beneath ink and politics. Even local histories treat him like a danger, something to be remembered but never fully revealed. Yet the traces remain, in half-forgotten chants, in carvings whose meanings only the oldest sons of the oldest priests can decipher, in stories told at midnight, with the fire dimmed low, where grandmothers lower their voices and children lean in with trembling curiosity. Every tale shares a single theme, that among the pantheon of African spirits, one stood apart, not for love, not for wisdom, not even for justice, but for a power so overwhelming that even God stepped aside when he approached. Those who still guard fragments of his story describe an entity who operated beyond the boundaries of morality. He was neither good nor evil, neither protector nor destroyer. He was pure force, raw, unshaped, unrestrained. A being whose presence was said to alter fate itself. And it is this power, this impossible authority, that made other deities keep their distance. But if his name was lost, removed, or silenced, then why do the shadows of his story still touch so many cultures across Africa? Why do different tribes speak of the same terrifying figure, even when separated by language, geography, and history? How can a god forgotten by time still leave footprints beneath our feet? The truth is simple. A name can be erased, but a power like his cannot. And now the journey to uncover this forgotten deity begins, not through written records, but through the living memory of those who still feel his presence in the unseen world. To understand this forgotten god, we must journey back to a time before kingdoms rose, before empires collapsed, before foreign ships touched African shores. A time when the continent was a vast spiritual landscape, alive with forces older than memory itself. In those days, the world was not divided between the physical and the spiritual. Both realms breathed together, intertwined like roots of an ancient baobab. In the heart of this world, long before humans built shrines or carved symbols, this god emerged. Not from the womb of a mother deity, nor from the union of divine beings, but from a rupture in existence itself. Elders describe it as a tearing in the sky, a moment when the boundary between realms split open and something powerful stepped through. He was not born, he arrived. Across multiple cultures, the earliest stories carry the same strange thread. Whether whispered by the Yoruba, echoed by the Igbo, or remembered by the Akan, they speak of a being whose arrival shook the universe. Birds fell silent. Winds reversed direction. Spirits fled into the earth. It was said that the ancestors themselves trembled, sensing that a force beyond their understanding had entered the world. Before humans named him, they felt him. Hunters in the forest reported a presence behind them, something watching, but not with malice. Priests saw visions of eyes burning with a light that did not flicker. Diviners spoke of a shadow that moved across the land, yet cast no form under the sun. And when the first rituals were performed, the drums changed rhythm on their own, beating in patterns no one had taught. It was then that the people tried to define him, but every name failed. Every title felt incomplete. He was not merely a god of war, though battles bent to his will. Not a god of death, though his passing could silence entire villages. Not a god of chaos, though storms followed his path. He existed beyond categories, an embodiment of pure, unshaped cosmic authority. And so in the earliest days of Africa's spiritual history, this god stood apart from all others. Not because he chose to, but because the universe had carved a space for him alone, a space no deity dared to challenge. It was in this moment, at the dawn of human consciousness, that the fear began. Not fear born of danger, but fear born of knowing that some powers are too vast to understand. As we move deeper into this mystery, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. If this god's origin was unlike any other, then his power must be equally unmatched. And soon we will uncover the ability that made even other gods tremble at the sound of his footsteps. What truly distinguished this forgotten god was not his arrival, nor the strange cosmic silence that followed him. It was the power he carried, an ability so immense that even the ancient deities who shaped rivers, commanded lightning, or governed death itself treated him with caution. In a world where gods clashed for territory, worship, and dominion, he was the only one who needed none of it. His authority was not earned, it was inherent. Across Africa, scattered testimonies speak of a single terrifying truth. This god could bend the spiritual hierarchy. He did not overthrow gods, he overshadowed them. He did not disrupt rituals, he completed them by his mere presence. Priests said that when he appeared, lesser spirits hid in the roots of trees, and rival deities retreated into the sky. It wasn't fear of violence, it was fear of being unmade, as though his power revealed the fragile illusion of their divinity. Some traditions claim he could see through realms, witnessing past, present, and the unborn future in the same breath. Others insist he had mastery over destiny itself, the power to rewrite the path of a life with a mere whisper. But the most haunting stories describe him as the keeper of spiritual truth, a being whose gaze stripped away all deception. No spirit could lie before him. No god could disguise its intentions. Even ancestors approached him with caution, fearful that he might unravel secrets buried beneath generations. There are legends of rival gods who attempted to challenge him, hoping to protect their influence. Yet none succeeded. Not because he struck them down, but because they found themselves collapsing in his presence, unable to withstand the sheer weight of his existence. Some accounts tell of deities who went mad after seeing him, wandering through winds and shadows, their once powerful names fading into forgotten myths. In sacred groves, old priests still speak of his voice that echoes nowhere. It was said that when he spoke, his words were heard not in the ears but in the soul. Those who listened found their entire being exposed. Every intention, every fear, every hidden desire laid bare. No god dared to face such truth. No spirit wished to be known so completely. It was not destruction that made him terrifying. It was revelation. A power that dissolved illusions, forced honesty, and reset the balance of cosmic order. And in a world where even gods relied on mystery to sustain their influence, this god was the one force they could never control. This is why his name was whispered. This is why his presence was avoided. And this is why, one by one, the gods retreated, not out of defeat, but out of self-preservation. As we move forward, the question grows sharper. If even gods trembled before him, what happened when this mighty being turned his gaze toward humanity? There comes a moment in every ancient story when the divine crosses the threshold into the human world. For most gods, this descent brings blessings, warnings, or guidance. But when he stepped into the realm of mortals, the air itself changed. Trees bent as though pushed by an invisible storm. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the earth. Animals fled. Even the ancestors paused their eternal murmuring, sensing a disruption in the balance of all things. It is said that he descended during a time of great turmoil, a kingdom torn apart by greed and betrayal. A land poisoned by lies, where sacred laws had been broken and ancestral covenants abandoned. Priests could not explain the sudden plagues. Diviners saw visions so dark they refused to speak them aloud. Warriors marched into battle but returned as shells of themselves, whispering of a presence moving through the night. And so, when he finally appeared at the edge of a burning forest, beneath a moon that refused to shine, every living thing understood that this was no visitation. It was judgment. Witnesses described a figure neither fully seen nor fully hidden, a form that flickered like heat rising from desert sand. His footsteps left no physical mark, yet the ground trembled. His eyes, they said, held galaxies, vast, ageless, impossible to meet without feeling one's soul unravel. No weapon could strike him. No spell could bind him. Even the strongest priests collapsed in his presence, overwhelmed by the sheer force of being known completely. But his arrival was not a punishment, it was a revelation. He walked into the heart of the troubled kingdom and spoke. One word, carried through the air like a wave of thunder that did not shake the ears but the spirit. The word revealed truth. Every lie that had rooted itself in the land tore free. Every secret sin rose to the surface. The king fell to his knees, his crimes exposed not by accusation, but by the gods' simple presence. Warriors dropped their weapons, elders wept. The land, suffocating under spiritual corruption, breathed again. Yet this encounter came at a cost. Those who stood too close saw visions of themselves stretched across lifetimes. Some could not bear it. Others wandered into the forest, never to return. A few rose with new strength, transformed by confronting their true selves. After that night, the god did not linger. He turned away from humanity just as silently as he had arrived. But the mark he left, an imprint of truth, power, and unfiltered revelation, remained etched in the soul of the land. And from that day forward, the people understood why other gods feared him. He was not a bringer of destruction, but a mirror of ultimate reality. A mirror no deity, and certainly no mortal, could gaze into without trembling. But then came the most puzzling mystery of all. After this encounter, he vanished, not defeated, not overthrown, but simply gone, and no one knew why. After that night of revelation, when truth spilled into the land like a broken dam, the forgotten god withdrew. No thunder announced his exit. No ritual marked his departure. He simply dissolved into the folds of existence, leaving behind a silence so heavy that even the wind refused to move. For a being whose presence once bent the boundaries of realms, his disappearance was as sudden as it was unfathomable. Some traditions say he returned to the rift from which he first emerged, the tier between worlds that opened long before humans carved kingdoms from the soil. Others whisper that he pursued a power even greater than himself, vanishing into a realm beyond the reach of gods, ancestors, and spirits alike. And then there are the darkest stories, the ones elders hesitate to tell. That a coalition of deities, fearing his unmatched authority, conspired to seal him away, not by force but through a cosmic binding of silence. Across Africa, myths echo the same eerie pattern. Shrines once dedicated to him suddenly fell into ruin. Sacred symbols that once pulsed with energy turned cold, their meanings forgotten. Priests who once spoke his name in trembling reverence lost their visions and declared the god asleep. Villages that once felt his watchful presence awoke one morning feeling abandoned, as though a protective shadow had lifted from the land. But disappearance does not mean extinction. Those who study ancient mysteries know that power cannot simply vanish. It transforms, hides, or waits. In certain remote regions, old diviners claim to still feel his energy lingering like a distant drumbeat beneath the earth. Not loud enough to hear, but powerful enough to sense. They describe it as a sleeping giant, dormant but never dead. There are also prophecies, scattered, fragmented, nearly erased, hinting that he left the world willingly, that he withdrew not out of weakness, but out of necessity, that humanity had grown too fragile, too tangled in its own illusions, to withstand his presence. His power, they say, reveals truth too intensely for this age. And so he retreated, leaving behind only the faintest traces of his story, waiting for a time when the world would be ready to remember him. Yet there remains one final mystery, perhaps the most haunting of all. If he chose to withdraw, why has his name remained forbidden? Why do the gods still avoid it? Why do spirits tremble at the mention of a being who has not walked the earth for centuries? The answer lies not in his disappearance, but in what he left behind. Signs, echoes, and shadows that still pulse through the spiritual fabric of Africa. And as we move into the final stretch of this story, we will discover that this forgotten god may not be as absent as he seems. Centuries have passed since he vanished, yet his echo still lingers across the continent like a faint vibration beneath the earth. If you know where to look, the traces are unmistakable. In remote villages untouched by modern cities, elders perform rituals whose origins they cannot fully explain. Rituals that once belonged to him. A bowl placed at a crossroads, a forbidden symbol carved into an old Iroko tree. A midnight chant spoken only during eclipses. The practices remain, though the worshippers have long forgotten the god behind them. Deep within sacred forests where sunlight enters only in thin golden threads, ancient carvings sit half-buried beneath roots and moss. Their shapes are strange, neither human nor divine as we know them. Priests who examine these relics say they vibrate with an energy they cannot name, as if holding the memory of something too powerful to fade completely. Some refuse to touch them, claiming the artifacts wake up when disturbed. There are stories, too, from the keepers of old knowledge, those last remaining guardians of ancestral secrets. They speak of dreams where a figure stands at the edge of their vision, watching, waiting, never fully revealing his face. They say that when he appears, time seems to stretch. Moments slow. Reality feels elastic. These visions come without warning, usually at turning points in a person's life, like a silent reminder that the forgotten god still observes from the shadows of existence. And then there are the unexplained events. Diviners who collapse during ceremonies, claiming they heard a voice that does not belong to the gods they serve. Children who speak words in ancient dialects no one taught them. Ritual grounds where the air thickens unexpectedly, and even birds refuse to land. These moments are rare, scattered, and easily dismissed by skeptics. But for those who understand Africa's spiritual heartbeat, they are signs. Warnings. Ripples from a power that never truly left. Some say he is watching humanity carefully, waiting for a moment when truth can once again be revealed without destroying the fragile illusions we cling to. Others believe he is awakening, slowly, deliberately, testing the world to see if it is ready for his return. And a few, the boldest among the mystics, claim that he has already begun to stir, his presence felt in the rising interest in forgotten gods, ancient rituals, and spiritual paths long dismissed by modern eyes. Whether these stories are prophecy or imagination, one truth remains impossible to escape. A god who once terrified even other gods does not disappear quietly. His shadow still lies upon the continent. His memory breathes in symbols, rituals, visions, and whispers carried by the wind. And somewhere in the unseen layers of reality, he waits for the moment when the world is finally prepared to remember his name. As we gather the scattered pieces of this forgotten god story, a powerful truth begins to emerge, one that stretches far beyond myth, legend, or ancient whispers. His existence was never about domination or worship. It was about revelation. He was the mirror no spirit wished to face, the force that stripped away illusions, the presence that revealed reality exactly as it was. And in that revelation lies the real reason he terrified gods, humans, and even ancestors. Because truth, when unfiltered, is the most powerful force in the universe. His disappearance was not a defeat but a design. A deliberate withdrawal to protect a world that had grown too fragile to withstand him. Humanity, entangled in deception, corruption, and fear, could not bear a god whose very presence would unravel all lies. And so he stepped back, allowing people to build their own kingdoms, their own beliefs, their own fragile sense of order. Yet the deeper revelation is this: Africa has always stood at the center of the world's spiritual architecture. Long before foreign religions crossed the oceans, this continent birthed gods of thunder, guardians of fate, spirits of justice, and keepers of cosmic secrets. Africa's deities were not mere characters in stories. They were forces woven into the very pulse of existence. And the forgotten god, the one who terrified even divine beings, was the most potent reminder of this truth. His story, erased but not extinguished, reveals a world where spiritual power is not measured by fear or violence, but by the capacity to confront truth itself. And perhaps that is why his echoes are returning now. Because humanity is once again seeking what was lost. Because people are searching for meaning in ancient wisdom. Because Africa's spiritual memory is awakening. The revelation is simple, yet profound. He did not vanish. He withdrew, and he is waiting not for worship, but for understanding. In the quiet spaces between night and dawn, when the world stands still and shadows stretch across the earth, some say his presence can still be felt. Not as a sound nor a shape, but as a subtle vibration in the soul, an ancient reminder that truth cannot be buried forever. And as humanity drifts further from its origins, as the world grows more tangled in noise and illusion, the echo of this forgotten god becomes impossible to ignore. Perhaps this is why his story is resurfacing now. Why the old symbols are being rediscovered. Why the ancient rituals are returning in dreams, visions, and quiet intuitions. The world is shifting, awakening, remembering. And somewhere beyond the thin veil of reality, a being who once terrified even other gods watches with silent patience, waiting for the moment when his name can be spoken again without fear. For in every age, there comes a time when forgotten truth rises, when buried knowledge forces its way to the surface, when the world must face the reality it has avoided. And in that moment, the god who disappeared will stand once more, not as a destroyer, but as a reminder of the power humanity abandoned long ago. You are standing at the edge of that revelation now. Africa holds the keys. Its myths, its spirits, its forgotten deities. The world's oldest spiritual map lies here, waiting for those bold enough to seek it. And as long as the story of this god continues to whisper through the cracks of time, one question will haunt us all. What happens when he finally awakens? This is only the beginning. And if you wish to journey deeper into the gods erased by time, the spirits buried by history, and the truths hidden from the world, then stay with us. Subscribe to Deep in History, because the next forgotten god is waiting.